Hey, Becky, what about this beat for your next song?
It's cool, but I'm into faster stuff lately, like Xfinity that gives me beyond gig speeds.
Got it. What about this then?
It sounds powerful, just like Xfinity. Because its supersonic Wi-Fi has 3 times the bandwidth, you can connect hundreds of devices at once.
That's what I call power.
Unbeatable internet from Xfinity. Made to do anything so you can do anything.
Restrictions apply. Actual speeds vary, not guaranteed. Requires compatible Xfinity gateway. Limited quantities available.
You made it. Here. Finally. Checked out of office to check into the sweet views of that place you've always wanted to go. You know the one. It's nice. Even the kids like it.
This place is so cool.
And they never like it.
Mom, can we go to the pool?
Look at that. Not even asking for the Wi-Fi. When you're with Amex, it's not if it's going to happen, but when. American Express. Don't live life without it.
Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. We're now on Red Circle as well as Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Also, you can find us on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. 5reasonsports.com, spell that one out. That's for content without a paywall. And check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Hope you're joining the competitions because it's very easy to beat me. Go to betteredge.com. That's BETTOR, edge.com/5 Reasons. You get $20 to play. This is peer-to-peer betting. You can find the line that you want, and it's legal in the state of Florida and 44 other states. So you will actually get your money. So check it out, betteredge.com/5 Reasons. And now, today's episode.
Yeah. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Welcome back to the 5 on the Floor podcast. This is not Ethan Skolnick. This is your host for tonight, Alex Toledo. I'm sorry to have ruined your podcast listening experience. Unfortunately, Ethan and Leif couldn't make it tonight. So it's me and Golden Boy, Wonder Boy, Brady Hawk, lead writer of 5reasonsports.com, put out another recent banger today. And that's what, today's going to be about. We're going to talk about Jimmy Butler today, and we're going to try to hit on it from a different angle that we talked about so far this summer. We're finally getting to the end. I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel of this long and treacherous offseason, trying to come up with content 4 or 5 times a week. And I think this Jimmy Butler topic is actually pretty fresh, considering I think you really hit it from a good angle, Brady, because this is something that has been talked about, I think, when the Kyle Lowry acquisition was first made, and it's Jimmy playing off ball. I think we saw some of it. We saw flashes of it throughout last season, and I think it made Jimmy a more efficient offensive player, kind of giving him more options. I talk about, diversifying your offensive portfolio. And look, I'm not a financial expert, but I'm pretty sure that's a good thing. And I think Jimmy doing that is always a good thing. And I think both of us would like to see a little bit more of it this season. We spent a lot of this summer talking about how now that they can't do and replicate exactly what they've been doing on defense, you got to kind of turn it up a notch on offense and, possibly pick up the pace a little bit, not just ball movement, but player movement, possibly playing smaller. The repercussions and the pros that comes with those things. And I think one of the bigger aspects of this, when you're just talking about details, is Jimmy as a roller, Jimmy as a screener, and how effective he is in those areas. So Brady, I want to set you up here. I want to be the point guard, and I want to set you up to talk about the ways that Jimmy can be used there, because it's definitely not just one. There's more than one. So first of all, what do you think of when it comes to Jimmy as a screener compared to where he was at pre-Lowry and post-Lowry, and how much does it have to change from where he's been at?
Yeah, I think you bring up Lowry is important because that is kind of the base setter. Like when you think about the fact that when he was acquired, that was something we were all talking about a ton. We were talking about the fact that he can hit him and he did that a lot, especially in the regular season, because obviously Kyle was kind of banged up in the playoffs. But in the regular season, I think they felt best when Jimmy was screening for Kyle more than anybody else in the roster, because Kyle can make the kind of the lob pass over the top. There was actually a specific game, I think it was against the Hornets, where I even included a clip in the article from that game. But there was a full game of that where they were just spamming that over and over, and it works. But it maximizes Jimmy. And the reason I bring it up now is because you look at this roster, we keep talking about all the creators on the roster. How do they maximize them all together? Well, one of the ways you do that for Jimmy is kind of moving him off the ball at times. And obviously he's your best player. You're going to want him on the ball. He's still going to have his similar usage, but you have Oladipo now in the mix. That's going to be higher usage. Tyler's going to be getting a similar usage. You want Bam getting a higher on-ball usage. So there's going to be gaps of the game where certain guys are going to have to move off the ball. And we talked about this with Tyler, but it's just much easier when we talk about it with Jimmy, because there's this screening aspect. The funny thing is when we talk about losing PJ Tucker, I don't think we talk about this enough, but they lost a lot of screening with that kind of losing that type of player, because he was everybody that would talk about PJ Tucker, the first thing they would talk about is his screening, his off-ball screening. If there was a hammer screen happening for a shooter, it was PJ. If there was a handoff that began to happen and it kind of got Bam off the handoff side of things, it was PJ Tucker. I think Jimmy sees just an uptick in a lot of this. And I was looking at some of the numbers and getting back to the kind of the screening and rolling stuff. When he was a roller in the regular season, he was scored 1.29 points per possession, and that was on 54% shooting. It's a very good number, especially for among his size and kind of position. And then the crazier part is now you look into the playoffs and you see 1.75 points per possession on 78% shooting. The fact that that's happening, and we talk about what Jimmy was able to do in the playoffs, but that number is insane. That is an insane number. The fact it was on similar frequency from the regular season, which still isn't super high of a frequency. Like, yes, most of his offense is coming on the ball, but he is a super effective short roll guy that many talk about. There's just so many different aspects that we could talk about, and that's why this is so intriguing. But the fact that they could utilize this specific aspect of his game next to a Depot and Hero in those certain lineups. So when we talk about, let's say, closing lineups where they throw all the creators on the floor, this is just such an easy get to. And there's so many different ways they can use it. I think the first one is when I brought up the handoffs and kind of subbing in for PJ, I brought up the word gravity in this article, and just having that gravity on the interior is so important for guys like Tyler. When he gives a handoff to Tyler, and now Butler's getting in space down the lane, you have to worry about him just in general, even if he doesn't have the ball in his hands. And now Tyler has an easy pull-up. Like, there's just so many aspects of this that I think they can work on. And this is why we talked about them leading offense with this roster. Like, the fact that you can go, even though many people probably hate it, go smaller but with more offense, it leads to having stuff like this. And this also points to Jimmy at the 4, which is not the reason I brought this up. Like, the fact that he's playing more as a roller is not being at the 4. If he's playing the 2, I think he should be playing a lot more as a roller. But there's just so many ways, I guess, they could break off from this when you just start talking about the offense they can run with certain lineups heading into next season.
It's really interesting because, like you said, it could branch off into so many different ways that you can use Jimmy as a screener. Like you said, gravity isn't just a Steph Curry thing. It's not just a Duncan Robinson thing, right? No, but seriously, the gravity with Jimmy Butler is the stuff that he can create at the rim, knowing that he is the Heat's number one primary, guy to get to the rim. He is the primary rim attacker. He is just a monster at drawing contact, bullying through guys who are even just a bit smaller than him. Doesn't have to be a wild mismatch, and he will take advantage. I just think like that in itself is such a threat to teams because they understand how good he is, especially after you see the way he turns it up in the playoffs. And the way that you can actually use that gravity isn't by having Jimmy stand around when he's not using the ball, right? When he's not on the ball, it's by having him screen for other players. And like you said, losing PJ, you lose a lot of screening there, which is how they actually would free up their shooters, whether, if it's a regular handoff, right? They would use PJ in a similar way to that they would use Bam, especially when Bam was out, or if it was just an off-ball action where PJ was screening, which is his more common role when the team was healthy. I think Jimmy can replicate some of that. Obviously, he's not going to play the PJ role, but I think because of Jimmy's sturdiness, bulkiness, and the gravity he has as an inside scorer, you could definitely leverage that and just make it so much easier, I think, for guys like Tyler Hero, guys like Victor Oladipo, guys like Kyle Lowry. And I'm not saying Vic is going to be, you know, the ball handler in a Victor Jimmy Butler screen and roll, even though it's kind of a funky idea, which I don't hate. But I'm saying guys like him who might catch the ball on the second side action might be playing off of an advantage created by the Jimmy Butler screen, for example. And I think that's what this is all about, right? It's about how can you create the most advantages from the most different spots on the court. And I think based on what we've seen this offseason, shifting towards a more Jimmy Butler centric offense and not in a traditional sense in the way of, okay, Jimmy's going to get the ball and have to do more now, because I don't think we want to see that during the regular season. It's more about how can you make things easier for everybody else so you can get that increased level of production that you want offensively to, you know, hopefully be a top 10 offensive team or higher. You know, I just think when you're looking at it, whether it's Jimmy as a screener for Bam, which is just my dream thing, you put a clip in there of that, right? I just that's like a fever dream for me. I don't know how much of it we're gonna see, but you know, inverted pick and rolls with Bam running it and Jimmy screening for him would be fun, even though obviously teams would collapse. But I just think things like that where you can get creative and funky, make things easier for Bam in that scenario. Obviously, you pointed out the Kyle Jimmy one, which they use a lot in the Hawk series, trying to beat up on mismatches there. You know, Trey being the obvious one. I just think you could use him as a screener for Tyler. Like, you can go a lot of different ways there. And even though his main thing on offense, his main role on offense isn't going to be screening, that is one of those ways where you can really juice your offense. Because we've been talking about all the different ways they got to be better, right? We spent all of last episode going through individual guys having to take leaps for the Heat to go up in offense. But just basketball things that you can do that doesn't involve a player adding stuff. Number one is Jimmy Butler screening and rolling. And so, Brady, the way that I want to, you know, I know that this is one of my weaknesses here is rambling too much, especially when I host, you know, given too much responsibility, which means I got to go back to playing off ball. So I'm going to pass the ball to you here and say, you know, to ask you here, when it comes to all the different ways that Jimmy can be used as a screener and roller, is that in itself good enough to get you to a top 10 offense if that's utilized correctly? And if not, what else is missing that doesn't involve, you know, any of the individual leaps that we talked about last time?
I'd say I think it is, because I mean, a lot of that is putting a lot of pressure on Tyler and Depot specifically. Like, I feel like it's all on those two probably more than anybody on this roster. And I know if that's probably a bad thing to say because everybody wants Bam to be in that discussion. But if Tyler and Depot take that type of offensive reins in the possessions that Jimmy is off ball, then I think they can. I think they're in that top 10, top 12 range in general. But I think the thing about this is they're not declining in usage too much with him on the ball. Like, as much as we talk about this and get into like the minor elements of certain guys' games, like we did this with Tyler too. Like, as much as we harp on one part of their game in this kind of long off season before games start to wrap up, like, he's still gonna have the ball in his hands a ton. He's still gonna be running pick and rolls a ton. He's still gonna have isolations. So I don't think there'll be that much of a difference there. It just comes for me like in the minutes that I said earlier, in the Tyler Depot Jimmy minutes, the thing I keep harping on, the thing that they went to so much in the playoffs, and it kind of got better over time. It's more about finding spots for the two guys that aren't on the ball. Like, that's just the issue here. It's like, if Tyler's the one that's off the ball, he's got to be moving, as we talked about in that one. If Jimmy's off the ball now, he has to be screening and rolling off the ball. Like, that's what the element is here. If it's Depot, it's kind of movement shooting off of screens possibly and getting downhill. So there's different elements for everybody. But the interesting part of this, and you hit on it, I think this kind of changes everything, is the Jimmy Bam inverted pick and roll. Because we talk about this in so many Bam episodes, but like, not only does it enhance Bam, but it also enhances Jimmy. Like, this isn't just a Bam thing. Like, I'll start off saying the fact that we want to see Bam inverted pick and rolls no matter who's screaming. Like, that's the main key here. It's about finding ways to get into the rim, finding ways to get him on the ball and find ways to score. And an inverted pick and roll allows him to just be his best self as a driver and kind of get down that right slot. And he's just been so good in that in general over time. But then you add in the fact that you talk about that play that I posted, because it's just so clean. Like, everything about it is clean. The fact that you have Bam flying off at 6'9" and has a handle and has an ability to finish. Then you have Jimmy, who, as we said before, has gravity as a roller and is able to take up space. If he wants to pop out and kind of drift to the mid-range, as much as you may say they'll live with that shot, teams are not living with that shot. They're going to guard Jimmy Butler off that little drift. So it just creates chaos. And then when you have these two guys that are running in action, who's off the ball right now? It's the Max Struses of the world. It's the Gabe Vincents. It's the Kyle Lowrys. It's all the guys that you kind of can't dip off of in a lot of ways because they're just good enough shooters on that weak side. And the other part of this is the two guys in the action are both very, very kind of determined to make that pass if they have it. Each of them can make the skip pass. Each of them can make the reads. So that's why this specifically, when we get down to it, is just so crucial. Like if they can run this more, it's just interesting because it's more effective than we call this the inverted action, but it's like this is the real action. The inverted is when Jimmy has the ball and Bam screening because that action has not been good. Like you look at the numbers of it because it's just teams just continually go under the screen and it just leads to nonsense because it just doesn't go anywhere most of the time. It ends probably in a Jimmy contested pull up or a Bam kind of entry pass into the post. Like it doesn't usually end. Have you ever seen a Jimmy lob off a 2-on-1 to Bam? Like everybody's thinking about it right now. Nobody can kind of think of one off the top of their head. So you look at the numbers, Butler and Bam off pick and rolls had 1.03 points per possession, which I said is worse than Butler and Dedmon and Butler and Yurtseven. They had Dedmon had a 1.10 and Yurtseven had a 1.22 points per possession with Jimmy. So that kind of shows you where they're at there. But I think it just shows that if that is the case, why not maximize both of them? I think it takes a lot of stress off Jimmy, first of all. It's all about getting to the postseason, and we know what Jimmy's going to be at that point. But why not take a little bit of stress off him in the regular season? And you may say, well, screening is taking a toll on his body, and it's not as kind of drifting as you may think. But I think differently. Like I think the fact that you're not stressing him to be on the ball, make plays every time down, I think that's way more helpful. And it also, like simultaneously, as we keep saying, force the ball in the Bam's hands. So if they could find that specifically, I think that's the most important thing. And I'll finish here with the last thing is I keep bringing up the fact that they're going to run probably much more movement sets in the half court and run a totally expanded motion offense. Every time you see a motion offense that's working best for Miami, it's with Bam playmaking in the post splits and everything along those lines. And I showed a play in this article as well where Jimmy kind of screened and slipped and got an easy basket out of it. I think this ties into that as well because I think Jimmy can really be utilized off the ball in these motion sets because we don't really think of him like that. But if Bam has the ball in his playmaking, the big is not below the rim. He's up on Bam. You have much space to operate down low. And what do you want more than anything for Jimmy Butler as an attacker? Not having the big around the rim. You want Jimmy going one-on-one at all times. Like that's what you want. We talked about his finishing in the past, but if you don't have a weak side defender coming over, I'm taking Jimmy Butler in that play 10 out of 10 times. So that's the thing here. It's like we talk about, it sounds so specific to have like a podcast talking about Jimmy Butler screening and rolling, but there's so many elements they could branch off from this. It feels like there's so many sets, their base sets that they run, everything that they do operates out of this, and it fits this roster as it currently stands because they have so many on-ball guys kind of maximize around him.
So look, I thought that was awesome. This has been a great episode for you as usual because it just really got my gears whirring as far as how good that inverted pick and roll can be with Bam and Jimmy, right? I think so much of what you're saying is so valid, specifically with having Bam placed so, at the top of the arc. We've seen the cons with it and why people complain about it so much, but there's also the clear pros, like what you're talking about. You clear out the paint for Jimmy. You clear out the paint for others for back cuts, which the Heat are known for doing. That's another way that they can juice their offense a little bit with things like that, right? I think having Bam up there, that clip you put in your article was a perfect example because they did it against the elite, Boston defense that people were trying to make to be one of the best of all time. And, that's just me being petty. I do think they were a really, really good defense, but he made that play happen. And even though they collapsed in the paint, which they did in that clip, leaving guys open in the corner, and I think one on the wing too, Bam was still able to make a simple read. All he did was have Jimmy screen for him in almost the same place that he initiates dribble handoffs, maybe a little bit closer to the rim by a foot or two, right? But it's almost the same play. And this is why I get so frustrated. It's almost the same play, but with an extra option added to it. The option is Bam is the handler. Bam can make another read that isn't feeding the shooter who's coming off the curl, coming off the handoff. It's Jimmy screens, Jimmy rolls, and either you give it to Jimmy, or if they're collapsing too hard, you pass it to the shooter. Like you said, he's got those reads. Jimmy has those reads. So you can run so many things off of there. Like you said, it takes the pressure off of Jimmy. It takes the pressure off of Bam. And that is how, and back to this, that is how you diversify both of their shot portfolios at the same time. You use your two best players in an action, which is how a lot of NBA teams function in the playoffs, right? They have their pet actions and then they try to get their best players involved so that there's not an easy switch or whatever, you know. And like you said, like maybe the easy counter like is collapsing, but they have the shooting, right? If they're going to be playing smaller, that kind of implies they're going to be playing with more shooting out there. And I think that's kind of what we're all expecting. This doesn't work if their spacing isn't right. That's kind of a given. But I do think this is such a great way, to get into it. I think you nailed it, right? And then as far as nailing it, I think we're going to be doing a lot of that once we get into the season and Leif and Ethan get back on with their prize pick hits and their prize pick tweets, because they're usually pretty right on with those. I tend to just roll with whatever Leif says, because, I think Leif just has a natural eye for it. And speaking of prize picks, the best daily fantasy out there, with Prize Picks, promo code 5, they will match your first deposit up to $100. I love when the season is on and I could just kind of rely on Leif's picks. He's constantly making money, and I think we all like to make money. And I think Prize Picks is just a general proponent of that. They give some nice big payouts. They got 24/7 live support. They've got fast and secure withdrawals. You can actually get your money quickly after you win money, right? I think that's pretty important as well when you're trying to win money on gambling sites. So shout out to Prize Picks, man. A lot of people have really fallen in love with this stuff. Like they've been a sponsor for us for a while now, one of our longest running, and it's for a reason. Like we actually get people to sign up and people to actually stay with it because of, all these benefits that we're talking about here. You'll get paid out quickly. Everything is pretty simple. It's just picking overs and unders. The mobile interface is very intuitive and easy to follow, easy to understand. And like I said, use promo code 5 and they'll match your first deposit up to $100. And yeah, shout out Prize Picks.
Tobacco-Free Florida has many free ways to help you quit nicotine. From free 2-week starter kits of Quit Aids to free cessation services like Phone Quit and Group Quit. We're even trying out new motivational tactics.
You're the greatest quitter. He's tobacco's greatest quitter. He's tobacco's greatest quitter of all.
Or maybe we'll just stick to the ways we know work. Visit tobaccofreeflorida.com or call 1-877-YOU-CAN-NOW for free nicotine patches.
So now that we finally got through that god-awful live read of mine, we're going to get to this last segment here. And this is going to be a shorter one than the first one. We're going to still talk about Jimmy Butler, but we're going to do it from another different angle. And I didn't say this at the top because I wanted to kind of throw it in here at the end. It's kind of like a bonus segment because the headliner for tonight's show was definitely your article, Brady. But, just to continue the Jimmy conversation, I think I wanted to hit on it from something that's been kind of controversial with him is his shooting. I think he came into the league as somebody who couldn't really shoot and really worked his way up as a grinded out role player who ended up adding kind of a shot creation bag, ended up adding a little bit of a mid-range jump shot, ended up adding a bit of a three, right? Whether it was a set shot or sometimes a pull-up shot, you would see Jimmy put those up in the clutch, and we've seen him do that here as well. But the point is, when he finally got to those peaks in Chicago, he had kept upping his volume and upping his efficiency from other areas that we just haven't seen him be that efficient at as a Heat player, except in the playoffs. And we already know the story there. Playoff Jimmy, 2 out of 3 seasons here, has just been a magnificent monster, perfect maximization of Jimmy Butler and what he can be, right? Like completely hitting his individual ceiling, right? And I think part of that is the way that he's able to go from pretty much a complete non-shooter in the season, right? Where like this season he shot, for example, 23% from 3, 2 attempts a game, to in the playoffs, 4 attempts a game and right under 34% from 3. And he did that in the 2020 bubble as well. And people wanted to kind of make it seem like it was a fluky thing. And he's done it before. He is somebody who will up his game, and we talked about that so much. But as far as specifically his shooting, is this something that he needs to, going back to that conversation about juicing the offense now with this roster the way it stands, is this something that he needs to take a little bit more seriously during the season, right? Is this something where he doesn't need to necessarily go 100%, go all out like the way he does in the playoffs where he turns it up, but where he can take shooting a little bit more seriously to be a threat as a catch and shoot guy, take a pull-up jumper if they're dropping and it's right there for you, and maybe it's later in the shot clock and you're not necessarily looking for a specific action like like they do most of the time. Do you think this is like something that they should actually have as a point of emphasis for Jimmy, just to get some easier offense generated a little bit more? Because I just think, I don't know if it's as simple as Jimmy doesn't really care about shooting during the regular season, but it's hard to ignore how significant of a jump in volume and efficiency he's undergone in these 2 seasons, the way that we've seen it happen, when he was a main player in Chicago, in Minnesota. Like, he has flashed these things before. Is this one of the ways that they can help their spacing and also their offense if they're going to be playing smaller?
Yeah, I think it is important. I think it's important because, for one, look, like the percentages of the regular season of his 3-point shooting is always weird in general, because when he shoots them in the regular season, it's like the worst possible shot on the floor, because he only shoots it if it's like 1 second on the shot clock and he's fading, or if it's the end of a game and everybody's screaming at him to drive and he takes a leaning, sidestepping fadeaway 3. Like, that's like the shots he's taking. So it's kind of feeds into the percentages being down. And it feels like in the playoffs, it's more set shots, comfortable shots that he's comfortable with. But the thing about shooting is that it's all about rhythm. Like, everything is rhythm. We learned that with Duncan Robinson. Like, once you got out of rhythm, it's hard to jump back in for a little bit. And the reason I think it's an interesting topic to bring up is because he was in full rhythm in the playoffs with it, and not to rehash the final shot in the game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, but other than the fact that it was a shot that I believe he should have taken, he was shooting it good from 3 in the playoffs. Like, it wasn't like a 23% shooter just shooting from 3. Like, he had a bit of rhythm at that point anyway. Other than the fact that he's hot from the playoffs, every clip you see from him in this offseason is him shooting from 3 in the logo. And I know that means nothing, because Ben Simmons has highlight reels of offseason work shooting from 3. So I can't take that too seriously. But it's a rhythm thing that if he starts out the season, he's a little comfortable and he goes 2 for 2, 2 for 4 in a couple of games, that builds rhythm, and that builds comfort, and that builds a role that he could potentially see. So it's more about, I guess, I'm not worried about the percentage. I'm just worried about the shots that he's taking, like where he's taking them in the time slots that he's taking them. Like, because a lot of these shots, like, you just don't want him forcing these shots. And it feels like 3s always come when he's forcing. Like, it's not, once he's comfortable and he has his big games, it's getting to his spots in the mid-range, getting into his spot in the mid-range, getting to the rim, getting to the free throw line. Like, when he's comfortable, he doesn't stray off to the 3-point line. He only strays off to the 3-point line when he doesn't have anything else going. So if he could work that in that way, like he does in the playoffs, where I think it was the game 6 in Boston, like the big game 6 where he had 47, he found a rhythm from 3 and he was just burying it. Like, we call him a big shot maker because that's what he does in those type of moments. But the fact that he can hit those shots could elevate this offense, because talking about potentially playing the 4 next to Bam, if he's able to just stretch the 4 a little bit and be a threat off the dribble, I personally don't see him being a threat off the catch. Like, that does not feel like something I see Jimmy Butler doing, like sitting in the corner and kind of catching and firing. Like, that is not something, I don't think that's in his wheelhouse of being in rhythm. I think his rhythm thing is kind of 2 dribbles, taking 2 steps and shooting over the top, more pull-up types. And if he could kind of nail that just decently, like, it doesn't have to be high percentage. It could be the kind of the percentage he shot in the playoffs. Like, if he can carry that over, that fixes a lot that they do offensively. And we keep talking about leading offense, and we talk about the things they could do screening wise. Now let's work in the fact that you could be a screener. You could be a handoff guy, fake the handoff, or pick and pop. Like, if you're able to do this type of stuff with Jimmy Butler in the regular season, like, you were talking about top 10, I might be talking about top 7 at that point of offenses if Jimmy Butler's doing that.
Man, what you just said there, like, man, you just expanded my mind with more possibilities for what they can do with that, aforementioned Bam Jimmy pick and roll. Because now we're talking about Bam Jimmy pick and pop. Like, oh my God, like what have we got?
Now it's top 3.
No, that would be an incredible play that we're absolutely never going to see as long as you and I are alive. But no, really, I think Jimmy being able to just decently space, like you're talking about, even though it probably won't be off the catch, where they just don't have to completely ignore him, that would be nice, man. That would be a nice luxury at this point, especially when, PJ is not out there. So that's one less guy. That's the good thing about PJ not being out there is it helps with your spacing, right? Because a lot of teams, like we saw in the playoffs, they just had Rob Williams cheating off of PJ the whole time in the corner and then ended up working out. And, if they can't treat Jimmy the exact same, that would be cool. I don't know if that's realistic because I think PJ was a pretty damn good corner shooter and they still ignored him. So I don't know. But Jimmy having a little bit more shooting gravity. I don't even know if gravity is the right word I'm looking for here because he doesn't have shooting gravity. But I think like if he could just become more of a shooting threat, it would give him more gravity and I think make him tougher to guard like you're talking about because it adds more reads if teams are a little bit more worried about that shot. And I just think it makes the offense a little bit easier to run and easier for Jimmy to kind of diagnose on the move, right? Where it might be less guys sitting in the paint waiting for him. If there's a lot of other shooters around him, like I just think they have options to be able to really get creative just with the roster the way it stands. And I just think that's kind of what we've been trying to get at here without outright saying it. And I think it's a good place to close. Thank you all for listening. Bear with me for this hosting thing. I'm still trying to figure it out. Don't be as hard on me as you are on Bam for not figuring it out right away. But really, thank you guys for listening. Shout out Prize Picks. Shout out all our sponsors. Check out everything on the network. Shout out Brady and his wonderful writing and great analysis. Another great show. Again, carried by Brady. And I just think, we're getting into the season now. And I think a lot of the topics have been done right over the summer. We've gone over a lot of the same stuff with the roster, the hole at the 4, the star stuff. And it really feels like, the season is around the corner now with media day less than a week away. Things are starting back up and, the NBA is really, really wide open right now. There's no clear favorites, but there's a lot of really good teams. And I think the Heat have a chance to really get back up into that top level category if they can get creative with some of the stuff that, they haven't done over the past couple of seasons, just to add more reads, add more options like we talked about. And, maybe they make a move before the trade deadline and strengthen up the roster a little bit there with another front court player. And I think all of a sudden they're back in. So like for all this negative stuff and, a lot of people being disappointed somewhat understandably with their summer, just because it's hard to not be disappointed when you're in the mix for those types of superstar players that they were in the mix for. I think despite all of that, they're still in a pretty good spot, man. Like not even including internal development, not even including, doing more Jimmy stuff. Like they just have so much that they can do still, I feel, even though like Spo is an elite coach, probably number one, have so much respect for him. There's probably still some meat left on the bone as far as what they can do with the roster as it stands. So with that being said, I'm done rambling now. You probably already tuned out and probably just skip to when Brady talks. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Regional Sports Network.
Autumn is in the air. Time for back to school, football games, and pumpkin lattes. Fall is also a great time to buy or sell a car online at Driveway.com. Welcome to Driveway, where you can feel completely in control of your car buying or selling experience. Our nationwide network with tens of thousands of vehicles is unmatched. And when you buy from Driveway, there's no pressure. We offer our best price up front. That's Driveway, a customer-friendly experience that makes buying or selling your car easy. Driveway, auto done easy.
You're finally at that hot new spot, the one your friends keep raving about, sitting across from your date. It's going...
Another round?
Really well. And that dish you've been dying to try, oh, it's headed your way. You can smell it, hear it sizzling fresh off that skillet as it comes closer, and served. Go ahead, enjoy. After your phone sneaks a bite first. When you're with Amex, it's not if it's going to happen, but when. American Express. Don't live life without it.